Welcome back to Peter Pan Lore and Peter Pan Facts here on YouTube, the YouTube home of this Peter Pan hobbyist and enthusiast, using my Peter Pan hobbyist enthusiast brain and knowledge to bring you fun facts, lore and trivia, talk about the world of the Neverland, the story of Peter Pan, and answer you guys' questions. Today we're going to be diving into a Halloweeny spooky idea, which is the concept of Halloween on the Neverland. Now, I've talked about this before over on my other channel, my cosplay channel, but today I'm going to talk about it right here on the Peter Pan Lore channel. I'm going to do two different things for you today. Number one, I'm going to dive into the lore and the island a little bit and discuss how Halloween might be able to happen there. And number two, I'm going to do a little bit of a fun exercise and I'm going to tell you what Halloween costumes I think some of the characters would wear. As always, feel free to chuck your ideas and suggestions in the comments down below. And if you have any ideas for how you would do Halloween on the Neverland or what you would wear as your costume, and hey, what you think the characters would wear as their costumes as well, chuck those down in the comments below. All right, let's dive in. And first, we're going to talk about how would Halloween work on the Neverland. One of the interesting things about the concept of Halloween happening on the Neverland is that it definitely will not happen quite the same way as it happens on the mainland, and this is all down to the seasons. You see, while winter and summer and spring and autumn, they all exist on the Neverland, they happen very differently. So while on the mainland you might be waiting for autumn to happen and then you would have Halloween on a set date in that season, on the Neverland, well, that might prove tricky. The seasons on the Neverland are quite chaotic. Listen to this description from J.M. Barrie's play of Peter Pan. It talks about how the Neverland is very compact, not large and sprawly with tedious distances between one adventure and the other, but nicely crammed. It is summertime on the trees and on the lagoon, but winter on the river, which is not remarkable on Peter's Island, where all the 4 seasons may pass while you're filling a jug at the well. So that is a very interesting thing to take into consideration. Halloween happens in autumn, so on the Neverland, would it be happening wherever autumn was? Or is it more likely that they would just pick a date or whenever they happen to feel like it and have Halloween then? I like the idea of the chaos of chasing it round the island. However, I said this in a Christmas video before and I will put the same logic onto Halloween. I think that instead of chasing winter and wherever winter is, that's where Christmas is, I think that with Halloween as well, you would pick a time. It might be the same every few number of days. It might be just when the inhabitants felt like it. It might even be at Peter's whim. He would wake up and say, "It's Halloween today," and of course everyone would go along with it. So I don't think it will be everywhere that the season of autumn is, but I do think that's a really fun concept to think about. And possibly you have to do Halloween in the season of autumn, if that makes sense. So when I talked about Christmas, I said they might pick a day and then you have to do your Christmas celebrations where winter is, and as soon as it moves, you have to follow it. So you could be ice skating on a frozen lake 1 minute, and then as the winter starts to move away, pick up the skates and follow it and go and build a snowman or something like that. So I'm going to say the same for Halloween. It's on a date that probably is in as much flux as the seasons themselves, and then you have to follow the season of autumn to do your Halloween celebrating. I will also say the same thing about Halloween traditions as I did for Christmas traditions. I think that it's interesting to have an idea of all the different beliefs and versions of Halloween that will have come to the Neverland from all the different people visiting it. Now, this is because I don't think Halloween would be a thing that happened on the Neverland without any outside influence. It is completely outside of the mortal world, and so why would they have it? It makes no sense to have it. It's a sort of mortal invention, and so I love the idea that over the years, this idea has grown and flourished. The idea of Halloween as an event, and different people from different time periods, different places in the world, whether they were traveling, coming as lost children, visiting, staying, setting down roots, they will have had different ideas, and so over time it will have flourished into something completely different. So what might some of those traditions be then? Well, we know they have pumpkins on the Neverland, so I definitely like the idea of having pumpkin carving, but I think they'd take it one step further. I think that they could do carving a pumpkin to wear it on your head so people can't see who you are, and having the little eyes gouged out and making a big face, that kind of thing. I like the idea of pumpkin carving competitions too, but I also like the idea of them growing giant pumpkins, and maybe you live in them for a few days, or you have a hollow bottom and you have to pick them up and run with them, a bit like a Bugsy Malone car, and you have to run with them to get to the season of autumn, wherever you want to set it down and have your little hideout, that kind of thing. I also like the idea of having tricks and treats, but they don't don't quite know what trick or treating is, and so instead of going up to houses, knocking on doors and getting presented with a trick or a treat, instead I like the idea of groups of people on the Neverland, particularly the Lost Boys, hiding out together, waiting for random people to walk past, and then jumping out and shouting, trick or treat, and then giving them a trick or a treat. And possibly the trick could be a fight. Maybe not to the death, maybe it is just for fun, but still it's a fight. And maybe the treat is something like gifts or jokes or a dance, something like that. I almost think that having it as a dance or a fight makes a lot of sense, particularly for Peter and the Lost Boys. So little funny, whimsical things like that I think could definitely happen. In terms of decorations, I love the idea of having decorations too, and the chaos of having to pull them all down off the trees and run after autumn as it moves around the island, that sounds really fun too. And if there are any left behind, then maybe you have to abandon them and you can't get them back until autumn covers that spot again. And that could be a part of the fun in the game as well, making it more involved and more chaotic. And I think that they would have similar decorations to what you might have on the Mortal World, but I don't think they would be as, well, obviously not as plasticky because they wouldn't have that kind of thing. But you could string up lights, you could get glowworm silks, you could make cobwebs, you could pull down cobwebs actually. And I like the idea of creating this big sort of spooky homage to Halloween decorations that they sort of remember from back where they came from. And it's almost become a sort of splatter, cover everything in Halloweeny stuff and then quick, take it all down and run. So it sort of becomes a chaotic barrage of spiderwebs and cobwebs and dangling decorations and lights and pumpkins, and then it just moves on and around the island, and eventually you just end up with this big trail of smashed pumpkins and lights and webs that have got torn down in the hurry as they run round and around and around, and by the next morning it's just this trail all the way around the island, and you can see almost where the season has gone when you look at the big trail of stuff. So I love that as an idea. Let me know what decorations you think they'd have down in the comments below as well. Something that I think would have stayed fairly similar to the way it's done on the mainland would be the idea of telling ghost stories, or at least scary stories. Now, I've talked before about the idea of having ghosts on the Neverland, and I think that's perfectly possible. I think it's perfectly possible to have a lot of creepy, dark creatures there. I mean, look at the mermaids for one thing. I like the idea that maybe they deliberately set Halloween, when they choose it, to fall at the turn of the moon, which is when the Mermaid's Lagoon is the most dangerous, and it being the turn of the moon would mean there was less light as well, so it can all be much more spooky. So I really love that idea, so I definitely incorporate that. And I love the idea of them sort of sitting around a campfire and telling spooky stories, and I'm in two minds. Maybe that's how they end the night, and as the sun starts to rise, they're all sitting around the campfire, and the last thing they do is share scary stories, either of things they've done that night or just stories they've created. But I also like the idea of trying to tell a story, sitting down at a campfire, and then having to, run after the autumn season and finish your story wherever it sets up next. So that's something I'd lean into as well. And finally, something else I think they would have is costumes. And for a fun wrap up of this video, I'm going to tell you 5 characters and the costumes I think they might wear. But before this, in terms of costumes, I think it's interesting to think about because, again, it's a tradition that would have been brought to the Neverland, but over time, everyone forgets why they're doing it. And something that might have started as you wear costumes to protect from evil or to scare away evil, it almost maybe becomes the reverse, and you wear costumes because everything turns scary, so you have to be scary with it, or you're trying to scare each other, or be the scariest one, that kind of thing. So I think turning it into either a strange sort of competition, or possibly it swings in the other direction and maybe no one's dressing to be scary and they're just dressing up to be dressing up. Equally, I think that could be something that would happen. So let me know which way you think this tradition would go. I'm very much torn between everyone tries to out-scary each other and they dress up because, oh yeah, we just have to dress up and be different and it's fun. And also, you know, being able to wear something different for a while, that will be quite fun as well. So let me know which one you think. I really want both, so maybe there's a way we can have both. Perhaps it's up to the whim of you or Peter to decide it's Halloween and it's scary Halloween, everyone has to be scary, or it's Halloween and everyone has to just dress up and be silly. Yeah, that actually works, doesn't it? So maybe we'll go with that one, but let me know which one you like in the comments down below. And now, to finish this little Halloween video, I'm going to give you 5 characters and tell you what I think they might dress up as. We're going to start with Peter himself, of course. So what would Peter Pan dress up as for Halloween on the Neverland? This one actually took me the longest to think about because my immediate thought was, well, he wouldn't because he's Peter Pan. He is everything. He doesn't need to dress up. But then I thought, no, he would. He would love to join in with it. And if it was a competition, he would want to be the scariest and the best and the greatest. And I was trying to think of something that would really call to him. And on the one hand, I thought he could dress up as something silly, like stealing pirates' clothes and dressing up as one of them. But then I thought, no, what's the instinct that I have with Peter? And it came to me. So I think that Peter would dress up as a bird. Probably a neverbird, possibly the most colourful one on the island, something like a phoenix, that kind of thing. And my reason for that is partly because of his origins in The Little White Bird, but also because of a moment when Captain Hook is speaking to him. He says, "Pan, who and what art thou?" And Peter's response, which comes right off the top of his head and doesn't really mean anything to him, but nonetheless, it's still his instinct. The first thing he says is, "I'm youth, I'm joy, I am the little bird that's broken out of the egg." And so I think that he would make a very good bird costume. I think he could be covered in big leaves. He would get lots of fairies and stuff to help him, maybe the gnomes as well, who are tailors, and they would make him big, cobwebby sleeves all the way down his arms, which wouldn't be too dissimilar to some of the things he wears as the descriptions in the play and the novel show, but also in stage plays as well. And I think he'd have big, huge wings, and the fact that he could fly, I think he would find it quite fun to fly and pretend to be flapping his wings while he went, and he could have a big long tail as well, and possibly even a beak that was made for him, almost like a mask he could pull up and pull down. So I definitely think Peter could really enjoy that. And if it went the scary route as well, you could definitely be a scary type of bird. I think he'd really get into that, and he could have big claws and everything as well, big knives. So that's what I'm saying for Peter. Whether it's scary or funny, I think Peter is going to be a bird. Next up, I have chosen Tinkerbell, and I like this one. So I think that Tinkerbell would choose to dress up as Marie Antoinette. And this is because of Tinkerbell's boudoir. The description of it shows she loves grand, exquisite things. She has a chandelier. She has beautiful bedspreads that she changes with the seasons. She thinks that her boudoir looks so much better than the rest of the home under the ground. Everything in it is just absolutely beautiful, antique and perfect. And I just love the idea that Tinkerbell would hear about Marie Antoinette, maybe hear stories of her, see pictures, and just think, oh yes, I want this aesthetic, and I can definitely see her popping on the wig as well. So for Tinkerbell, I'm saying Marie Antoinette. Next up, we're going to do Wendy's costume, and Wendy was very easy for me. I immediately went to Cinderella. Now, this is because Cinderella is a big important part of the story. It is the story that makes Wendy want to go to the Neverland, because Peter tells her the Lost Boys don't know any stories, and how he had come to listen to the ending of the story of Cinderella that her mother was telling her, and then he was going to go back and tell the Lost Boys. Wendy then said that she knows lots of stories and she could come and tell them to the Lost Boys, and once she has been revived and they've built a little house for her, she puts them to bed that first night, and she says that she will tell them the story of Cinderella. So I think she would absolutely love this. She could make it herself. I think she would make a beautiful Cinderella, and she would really enjoy that. Plus, being able to make glass slippers, I think she would find really fun. She could definitely get some of the gnome tailors to help her out. Maybe there are some cobblers on the Neverland as well. They could carve them out of ice, I think, from one of the frozen lakes, and Wendy would have a fantastic time. And perhaps part of her costume would be that the shoes would slowly melt, and when they melt, that's Cinderella's version of midnight, and then maybe she could pull off the costume and underneath there's Cinderella's sort of rags clothes, that kind of thing. I think Wendy would absolutely love that. So Wendy I'm putting as Cinderella. Who is next? This one I think is just absolutely beautiful to imagine, and it is Mr. Smee. Now let me know again in the comments down below, who do you think these people would dress as? What do you think their costumes would be? My one for Mr. Smee is actually that I think he would dress as Captain Hook. Now this would be a playful homage, not a Mickey take. And I think he could get away with this for two main reasons. Number one, he is described as the only non-conformist in Hook's crew, and he doesn't seem to be quite as scared of the captain as everyone else. And also, reason number two, he does seem to be the closest to Captain Hook, and therefore could get away with doing this, and probably not be thrown overboard or, sliced with the hook for it. I think that he would do it in a loving and playful way, and he could impersonate some of Hook's mannerisms in a way that the pirate captain would not find insulting. And actually, Hook might even lend him one of his coats to do it with. So I think Smee dressing up as Captain Hook would be hilarious, funny, and just a little bit beautiful. What do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. And now we're going to move on to the final costume, which is, of course, Captain Hook himself. Now, I went back and forth on this one for a little while, but eventually I came to this, and I think I am right. I think that Captain Hook would dress up as Mozart. Now, this is because Captain Hook is described as having a real love of music. He plays some instruments himself. He was brought up with an Eton education. He knows about history and he loves that kind of thing. So I think he would really love Mozart's music, but more than that, I think he would love Mozart's aesthetic. I think that considering this is a man who was once compared to looking a bit like the Stuart family and therefore now dresses a bit like King Charles II, I think seeing portraits and illustrations of Mozart would make Captain Hook think, oh, that's a good look. I would like to dress like that. And much like Tinkerbell with the wig, I think that he would look fantastic and wear one of the wigs as well. I think he'd really lean into it as well. He would very much enjoy it. He'd probably get Smee to help him to sew the costume together using some of his old coats and bits and pieces and Smee's sewing machine. So I definitely think Captain Hook could rock a Mozart costume. Okay, so that is it for this little Halloween video. I am incredibly busy because I work 3 jobs this time of year, so sorry this video is short, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what Halloween traditions you think might happen on the Neverland down in the comments below. What costumes do you think anyone on the Neverland would wear? And finally, what costume would you wear if you were going to the Neverland for Halloween? Let me know in the comments down below. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Don't forget to hydrate, and I will see you very soon. The next video on this channel will probably be the next part of the 120 Years of Peter Pan costume history series. We are approaching the end. All right. Thank you very much for joining me. Have a wonderful day. Happy Halloween!